Hey guys, not really expecting anyone to tune in because I didn't announce this, but I've been working through a lot of stuff today and I figured I might share some of it just because there's so many people that I've talked to recently about narcissistic relationships. I honestly think I should probably do a fucking YouTube series on this shit with the amount that I've been reading. But I wanted to share tonight that I've basically been pulling together bits and pieces from 5 different books that I'm reading on Narcissism 2, which are staples for me, that have been super helpful, and I've sent them to people in the past. And then 3 more that are kind of from different perspectives, one including the narcissist perspective, which is really interesting, because I think that what people wind up doing, and a lot of people that I've talked to in different situations have wound up in the same types of relationships over and over. And you'll meet somebody and you'll think that they're different. You'll think that they have different characteristics. Their personality might be totally different. They might be an introvert or an extrovert. And then, a few months down the road or a few years down the road, you find that they're the exact same type of person and you date the same person over and over. And that's especially concerning if they wind up being narcissistic or emotionally abusive or pathological liars. And I've been spending a ton of time researching this stuff and identifying some patterns and characteristics that I want to work through and share, because I just haven't found a really good compilation of, God, that word makes me think of Pornhub every time. A good compilation of literature that identifies kind of a holistic picture of narcissism and how to identify narcissists off the bat, because they can be very different, but they all have the same types of characteristics. So one thing I'm doing right now is kind of developing my own roadmap to healing, which I'm hoping will be really helpful for people, especially once I go down the road of pursuing my degree in psychology. But right now, some of the things that I have listed out based on the research I've been doing that I think would be really helpful for people who've been in an abusive or narcissistic relationship and don't want to repeat that pattern. I'm just going to look at it. So there's a series of questions that I'm going to pull into a blog. I think it's really helpful for people to kind of walk through these things and answer them for themselves, and cross-reference this healthy relationship checklist that I also pulled together. The first question is, what did I believe about myself in the relationship? And that really is not necessarily what you believed about yourself, but what the narcissist or what your partner, if you haven't yet identified them as a narcissist, made you believe about yourself. And what happens with narcissistic relationships is they establish this precedent of making you constantly justify yourself, and you feel like you're always trying to catch up, and what you believed about yourself at the beginning of the relationship is very different from what you believe about yourself in the middle of it, and oftentimes what you believe about yourself at the end. So the first question is identifying, what did I believe about myself in the relationship? The second is, what expectations did my narcissist have of me that I was not allowed to have of them? And one of the other things that I've seen in narcissistic relationships and some of the studying I've done is that there's a really significant correlation between what the expectations are of you in your partner, if they're a narcissist, and the fact that you are not allowed to have the same level of expectation of them. So there's a very significant double standard in most narcissistic relationships that can be super frustrating for the victim. The third question is, what boundaries were violated? I think most people wind up in relationships where they can identify that their narcissist cheated or was abusive, but there are other boundaries that were violated along the way. And that's what happens with narcissism, is they violate a series of boundaries in increasing gravity. So it starts with little boundary violations, and then it grows and grows until you wind up in a position where you're so accustomed to having your boundaries violated, and they're so accustomed to getting away with it that they're able to get away with bigger and bigger things until you reach a breaking point. The fourth question is, what healthy relationship markers were missing? And again, that references the checklist that I'm developing on healthy relationships. The fifth question is, what 3 things made me feel unsafe? And there can be more, but just identifying 3 very specific things that made you feel unsafe. And by unsafe, it doesn't have to be like your life was threatened. It can even simply be the situations that you find yourself in with your narcissist, where your heart is racing and your chest is tight and you feel uncomfortable. Those are the like physical symptoms that I've also seen abused men and women feel, that are good markers of feeling unsafe. When your temperature rises and you're anxious and your chest is tight and you can't breathe right, those are symptoms of feeling unsafe in the relationship. The 6th question, these are more positive, or are leading to more positive questions. What did I believe about myself before the relationship? And it can be really fucking hard to go back, but it's super important to look back at who you were before the relationship and what you believed about yourself, as opposed to the first question that you answered, which is, what did I believe about myself in the relationship? The 7th question is, what do I believe about myself now? And what I've learned personally is that there's a really interesting hybrid of what I believed about myself before the relationship, what I believed about myself in the relationship with the narcissist, and what I believe about myself now. And it's almost like I'm constantly fighting for that person that I thought I was beforehand, and fighting to decrease the sensitivity I have to what the narcissist made me feel about myself in the relationship. And the last 2 questions are, what 3 things make me feel safe? Because it's really important after an abusive relationship or a narcissistic relationship, or a relationship where your boundaries were simply violated, to pursue things that make you feel safe, to reestablish your sense of boundaries. The last question is, what things in my life empower me? Because building your sense of self and your trust in yourself up after a narcissistic, abusive, or boundary violating relationship is key to not being in a position of vulnerability with your next potential abuser. And I want to share on a personal note, I have written out some things that I believed about myself in my recent relationship, because I think that and these are pretty personal, and I'm happy to share them, but just as examples of answering that first question, if you're coming out of an abusive or narcissistic relationship, or if you're in one now, these things might resonate with you. I don't really know what it's like on the guy side, but I would be shocked if some of these things were not similar. So some of the things that my previous partner made me believe about myself in the relationship were very foreign to me before the relationship. But I really, truly believed that I was these things in the relationship, because I constantly fought to justify myself and convince them that I was valuable in the relationship, and convince them that their perspective of me was not who I was. And that's not a good position to be in. I believed I was dramatic. They always told me I was over dramatizing things. They believed I had unrealistic expectations. That came up a lot. Andrew is my ex's name. He would constantly say that I had unrealistic expectations when he would make mistakes, and I would hold him accountable. I was told that my expectations were unrealistic and unhealthy. I believed I was unforgiving. Same thing. He would make a mistake. I would call him out. And I was told that I was unforgiving. I was an unforgiving person because I was holding him accountable, and there was no remorse and there was no change. Believed I was extremely emotional. I cried more in that fucking relationship than I have ever cried in my entire life combined. Hands down. I've never been a crier. I cried constantly in that relationship. And let me just fucking tell you right now, if you are crying all the time, male or woman, man or female, God fucking damn it, man or woman, male or female, if you are crying or emotional or unsettled or anxious constantly in your relationship, something is really fucking wrong and you need to look at it. I believed I was irrational. He always said that my reactions to his actions and decisions and communication was out of proportion, that it was dramatic and it was irrational. He told me I was rude when I would confront him and be direct and honest about the choices that he made and some of the ways he was very selfish and disrespectful to me. I was told that I was being rude. I was told that I was selfish. This came up a lot when I was setting boundaries. Anytime I had tried to set a boundary, I was told that I was giving an ultimatum and that I was being selfish, instead of any recognition of my autonomy and my feelings and my ability to set boundaries, I was told that my boundary setting or my attempts to do so were selfish. I was told I was reactive because some of the things he did were really fucked up, and I would react. I would be emotional. I would be upset. I would be frustrated. And I think those reactions were very proportional to some of the things that were happening, like finding out he was on dating apps most of our relationship. But I was told I was being reactive, emotional, and irrational. I was told I was constantly making mistakes. God fucking damn it. If you are in a relationship with a narcissist, you will know, because they will never be happy. I distinctly remember when we first moved into this place, we moved in and I think I had a soda on the coffee table and I accidentally bumped it and I spilled it. You would have literally thought I cheated on him based on the level of reaction to me making simple mistakes. And that was always the case in the relationship. I couldn't spill something. I couldn't drop something. I couldn't break something. I couldn't move something that he didn't want moved. The level of perfectionism that the narcissist expects of you and that your abuser expects of you leaves you walking on eggshells. So I believed that I was constantly making mistakes and I always felt like a failure. I believed I was demanding. I prepped our meals every day. I cooked for him every night. And when I would request that he take the trash out or do the dishes, which maybe happened 2 times over the course of the entire almost 2-year relationship, I was told that was unrealistic and that I was being demanding. There was no level of equality in the relationship at any point. And that is very typical of a narcissistic relationship. Someone is always doing more work and it's always the victim. And I was told I was crazy. This is the first time in my life this happened, actually. And that was after my breaking point, after repeated cheating, after finding out, I can't believe I'm putting this on here, finding out that I had chlamydia because he had cheated on me and lied multiple times about using protection with other women. And after finding out that he was on dating apps for most of the relationship and he was constantly asking to get back together and telling me that he loved me, I got to the point where I did feel crazy. I was messaging girls on Instagram asking how they knew him, and I never got to that point before all of his cheating and lying. And the label of crazy, when instead of reacting when he said he was attempting to rebuild the relationship, and found out that I had messaged someone he'd recently followed on Instagram to ask if they had met him on a dating app, which he had done multiple times, I was told I was crazy. So these are just some of the things that I wanted to share that I believed about myself in my abusive relationship, because I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people. And I think it's really helpful if you have been through an abusive relationship, even if this is years ago, guys. You're going to tend to be drawn to the same kinds of people over and over if you don't do the work to undo the damage and identify some of these markers. And if you can take the time tonight, like I did, to sit down and just identify what did my narcissist or my abuser or my partner make me, or what are they making me believe about myself, all of these negative things that they make you believe about yourself that I think you deep down know are not true, it can be a really helpful first step in breaking the cycle of abuse and narcissism. So anyway, that's it. Laters.